Hello. Drama lovers, welcome back to my channel today. Phyllis Summers had never been known for sitting quietly while her world fell apart around her. The fiery businesswoman had spent years fighting battles from every direction, and now, with tensions escalating across Genoa City, she once again found herself at the center of a storm. But this time, Phyllis wasn't willing to wait for someone else to save her. She was prepared to take control of the situation herself, no matter who got caught in the fallout. The pressure had been building for weeks. Victor Newman's latest moves had rattled nearly everyone connected to the Newman empire, and Phyllis could feel danger closing in from all sides. She knew better than most that Victor rarely made threats he couldn't back up. If he was preparing to strike, then anyone standing in his way could quickly become collateral damage. Still, Phyllis refused to back down. Instead of retreating, she became more determined than ever to protect what mattered to her. She spent countless hours working behind the scenes, trying to gather information and anticipate Victor's next move before it was too late. But despite her confidence, even Phyllis understood she couldn't fight this war entirely alone. That realization pushed her toward an uncomfortable position, relying on people she wasn't sure she could fully trust. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria Newman found herself consumed by questions about Nick's recent behavior. Her brother had become increasingly secretive, and Victoria's instincts told her something serious was happening beneath the surface. Nick had always been able to keep calm under pressure, but lately there had been cracks in that carefully controlled exterior. Victoria noticed every hesitation, every suspicious pause, every evasive answer, and the more she paid attention, the more convinced she became that Nick was hiding something major. Their conversation started innocently enough, but it quickly turned tense when Victoria began pressing Nick for details he clearly didn't want to share. She questioned where he had been spending his time and demanded to know why he seemed distracted whenever family matters came up. Nick attempted to brush off her concerns, insisting that he simply had a lot on his plate. But Victoria wasn't buying it. Growing up in the Newman family had taught her how to recognize deception, and she could tell her brother was carefully choosing his words. That only fueled her suspicions further. Victoria pushed harder, refusing to let Nick dodge her questions. She reminded him that secrecy had a way of destroying families, especially theirs. If something dangerous was happening, she deserved to know the truth before it exploded into an even bigger disaster. Nick remained guarded, though the strain on his face betrayed how uncomfortable he had become. Part of him wanted to open up, but another part understood the consequences of revealing too much. The situation surrounding Phyllis had already become complicated enough, and dragging Victoria deeper into the mess could make everything worse. Unfortunately for Nick, Victoria wasn't about to let the matter drop. Elsewhere, Phyllis was growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress. She had tried playing by the rules, tried being patient, and tried trusting others to handle things carefully. But patience had never been one of her strengths. The more obstacles she encountered, the more convinced she became that drastic action was necessary. She began considering risky options, dangerous options. Phyllis knew taking matters into her own hands could backfire spectacularly, but she also believed doing nothing would guarantee failure. In her mind, she had already spent too much time reacting to everyone else's decisions. Now it was time to become the one controlling the board. Her determination intensified after another heated confrontation reminded her exactly how vulnerable she had become. People continued underestimating her, assuming she would eventually surrender or accept defeat quietly. But underestimating Phyllis Summers had always been a costly mistake, and she intended to prove that once again. As tensions mounted, rumors started spreading through Genoa City about shifting alliances and secret agendas. Nearly everyone seemed to suspect that major trouble was coming, though few understood just how explosive the situation had become behind closed doors. Victoria, however, was starting to piece things together. Her instincts kept leading her back to one unavoidable conclusion. Whatever Nick was hiding somehow connected back to Phyllis. That possibility immediately raised alarm bells. Victoria knew firsthand how chaotic things could become whenever Phyllis found herself cornered. She confronted Nick again, this time refusing to soften her approach. Victoria bluntly asked whether Phyllis was dragging him into another dangerous scheme. Nick instantly became defensive, insisting things were more complicated than Victoria realized. But instead of reassuring his sister, his reaction only confirmed her suspicions. Victoria warned Nick that protecting Phyllis could come at a serious cost. She reminded him that family loyalty had limits and that constantly cleaning up other people's messes rarely ended well. Nick understood her concerns, but he also couldn't ignore the complicated history he shared with Phyllis. No matter how many times things fell apart between them, there was always an emotional connection pulling him back. That connection made everything harder. Nick found himself trapped between protecting his family and helping Phyllis navigate a situation that threatened to spiral out of control. Every decision carried consequences, and he knew one wrong move could trigger chaos throughout the Newman family. Meanwhile, Phyllis continued setting her own plans into motion. She secretly reached out to unexpected sources, searching for leverage that could shift the balance of power in her favor. Some of her moves shocked even those closest to her. It became increasingly clear that Phyllis was willing to cross lines others wouldn't dare approach if it meant securing victory. But desperation often clouds judgment. As Phyllis pushed forward, cracks slowly began appearing in her strategy. The emotional weight of everything happening around her started affecting her ability to think clearly. Though she projected confidence outwardly, internally she was wrestling with fear, anger, and uncertainty. She hated feeling vulnerable, and she hated even more that Victor Newman seemed determined to exploit every weakness he could find. Still, Phyllis refused to surrender. She convinced herself that bold action remained her best chance at survival. If she moved quickly enough, maybe she could stay one step ahead of the destruction closing in around her. Unfortunately, danger was approaching faster than she realized. Victoria's investigation into Nick's behavior eventually uncovered clues that pointed toward a much larger crisis brewing beneath the surface. The more information she gathered, the more alarmed she became. She started realizing that this wasn't simply another family disagreement or romantic complication. Something far more serious was unfolding. Victoria once again cornered Nick, demanding complete honesty this time. She made it clear she was tired of vague explanations and half-truths. If their family was heading toward disaster, she wanted to know exactly what they were dealing with before it was too late. Nick struggled with how much to reveal. He knew Victoria could help if she understood the full picture, but involving her would also increase the risk of everything unraveling. The secrets surrounding Phyllis had already become dangerously unstable. One wrong conversation could ignite consequences nobody would be able to control. But Victoria wasn't backing down. Her determination mirrored Phyllis in many ways, relentless, sharp, and impossible to ignore once she locked onto a target. Nick realized he might not have a choice anymore. Keeping Victoria in the dark was becoming increasingly impossible. At the same time, Phyllis prepared for a major confrontation that could change everything. She carefully rehearsed what she wanted to say and how far she was willing to go. Deep down, she understood the stakes had never been higher. One mistake could destroy relationships permanently, damage reputations, and trigger fallout across Genoa City. Yet despite the risks, Phyllis felt strangely energized. Chaos had always awakened her survival instincts. When backed into a corner, she became more dangerous, more creative, and more unpredictable. And right now, unpredictability might be her greatest weapon. Still, not everyone believed Phyllis could win this battle. Some feared she was heading towards self-destruction instead. Nick especially worried about how far Phyllis might push things if she felt desperate enough. He knew her better than most people did, and that knowledge terrified him. Once Phyllis decided to fight, convincing her to slow down became nearly impossible. Victoria recognized that fear in Nick immediately. It finally helped her understand the true depth of the crisis. This wasn't merely about business or family politics anymore. Emotions had become tangled with secrets, loyalty, and revenge in ways that threatened to consume everyone involved. Victoria urged Nick to think carefully before making any irreversible decisions. She warned him that protecting Phyllis at all costs might ultimately destroy the very people he was trying to help. Nick listened, but uncertainty continued haunting him. He cared deeply about his family. He also cared deeply about Phyllis, and balancing those loyalties seemed increasingly impossible. Meanwhile, Phyllis moved closer to executing her plan, unaware that multiple people were already beginning to connect the dots behind her actions. The walls were closing in faster than she expected, and time was running out. Yet if there was one thing Phyllis Summers had proven repeatedly over the years, it was that she never stopped fighting, even when the odds seemed impossible. As Genoa City braced for the next wave of fallout, one question lingered above everything else. Would Phyllis succeed in taking control of the chaos, or would her determination push everyone she cared about straight into disaster? And with Victoria continuing to pressure Nick for answers, it seemed only a matter of time before long-buried secrets finally exploded into the open.